All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Saturday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great weekend. We're going to do a little bit of a film session on Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. The Dallas Mavericks went on a 23-7 run in the third quarter that turned a 16-point deficit into a 2-point deficit. And I thought it perfectly encapsulated the difference in the half-court execution ability of these two teams against each other's loaded up defenses. So we're going to go through that run. And then I have a couple of clips at the end of the game that we're going to go over, mainly just the final possession where Anthony Edwards had that turnover where he threw the ball out of bounds, and then Luka Doncic's game winner. So we're going to do a bunch of film from Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals as we head into Game 3 tomorrow. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And then keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments so we keep getting to them over the course of the rest of the postseason. I'm recording a mailbag after this that'll be coming out later today. And then one last note before we get started. On account of the Tyrese Halliburton hamstring injury, he's going to be out for Game 3 tonight. I still plan on covering every game of the Eastern Conference Finals, but for my wife's sake, who's been supporting me through a hell of a grind over the course of the last few months, as I've basically been working every single night. Now that series is basically over with the Tyrese Halliburton injury, we're still going to cover it. I'm just not going to stay up late into the night to cover it. So we are going to cover that one with a video on Sunday morning. So just don't expect a live YouTube show after Eastern Conference Finals Game 3. Today, we will be covering it the next morning. All right, let's talk some basketball. So we have 19 clips we're going to go through. Before we get to the clips, I have one stat that I wanted to go over with you guys. I talked a lot about last night how I kind of had a crystallizing moment during the fourth quarter, even while Minnesota was in front, that no matter what happened, I thought Dallas was going to win the series. I thought that Dallas was experiencing some unsustainable poor shooting, and Minnesota was experiencing some unsustainable good shooting, and that it was hiding the fact or disguising the fact that Dallas looked like they were the much better half-court team. They were getting great shots every time down the floor. They seemed comfortable. Their stars were able to get to their spots easier. Meanwhile, Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns looked completely and utterly flummoxed, and it was just like Jaden McDaniels hitting everything in Game 1 or Naz Reid hitting everything in Game 2 that was kind of disguising that basketball reality that was taking place on the floor. So I have one stat that I want to share with you guys before we get into the film. So far through 2 games, Minnesota is shooting 45% on wide open threes, meaning the defender is at least 6 feet away in the series through 2 games. Dallas is shooting 24% on wide open threes. The same Dallas team that shot 42% in the first 2 rounds. So Dallas is clearly shooting well below, even if you don't think 42 is realistic. And by the way, when it comes to wide open threes, meaning the defender's at least 6 feet away, you want to be around 42%. That to me is like a realistic number for a team that's generating quality wide open catch and shoot threes, right? Like obviously in the aggregate, when you factor in the contested late clock threes and off the dribble threes, like every team's going to land somewhere in the mid to high 30s, right? But in terms of wide open threes, you're going to hit a lot more than 24% over the course of the rest of the series if you're Dallas. And that, to me, has been the story of the series. Minnesota is shooting 21% better on wide open threes than Dallas is, and that is hiding the fact that Dallas has demonstrated to be the better basketball team here through 2 games. And it's by the miracle of Luka Doncic's brilliant late game play and his shot making and his decision making and him just being the best player in the series. Dallas is up 2-0 anyway. And so that's why I feel super confident in their ability to close out this series, regardless of what it may or may not have happened at the end of the game last night. All right, on that note, let's get into this 23-7 run in the third quarter. Let's go over to the film. We're this close to crowning a new NBA champ, and with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. There's only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple. The championship odds right now As we head into the conference finals, according to DraftKings, Boston's at -150, the Timberwolves at +275, the Mavericks at +500, and the Indiana Pacers, a long shot, at +2,500. New to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. So this first play is a double drag. This is a double drag that they ran a few times in this third quarter sequence. Now, a double drag, again, as you can see, the basic concept of a double drag is two screens. And as Luka comes off, Derrick Jones Jr. is going to pop to the three-point line. Daniel Gafford is going to roll hard to the rim, right? That's the structure of the play. We're going to get a hedge from Mike Conley. Mike Conley's hedging. The whole purpose there is to try to force Luka to take more of like a banana route around this way to give Jaden McDaniels more time to recover. But the important detail is we know that we can see that Rudy Gobert is up at the level of the screen. So where this is already going south for Minnesota, and this has been a big story of the series through both games, is, and I talked about this a lot after game one, this is the low man, right? This is the guy that's in best position to help in this ball screen, right? Like Anthony Edwards is guarding Kyrie Irving. He's not going to be helping in this situation. But Karl-Anthony Towns is guarding PJ Washington, who's a capable corner three-point shooter, but has been missing so far to this point in the series. And the bigger threat is the roll man. And this is where you're going to see Daniel Gafford get behind the play. So as we see here, Gafford gets behind Gobert. Now, as soon as that has happened, Cat has a new responsibility. It's no longer get to PJ Washington. His responsibility is to deal with Gafford. McDaniels and Gobert kind of get in each other's way. This is the worst possible thing you can do as a defense. Zero pressure on the ball handler while also letting the roller get behind. You're effectively blitzing in the form of compromising your defense on the back line while also applying no actual blitz pressure onto the ball handler. In this case, Luke is able to easily throw the pass to Gafford, and once again, Cat is just way too slow on this tag of the roller, and Gafford gets a dunk. That's going to be a recurring theme here in this third quarter, just Luka just picking Minnesota apart in the half court. Here's just a straight ISO. Fast forward a little bit. Jaden McDaniels, as soon as he gets on any sort of angle, as soon as Luka gets any sort of angle, like even this is a little bit of an angle, but he's got such a size and strength advantage versus Jaden that he can turn the corner relatively easily. There's like a little half spin, and then he's going to get a crossover dribble. Boom. McDaniels is kind of sort of in position, and if this is like Devin Booker or some sort of other slender perimeter type of player, he might be able to use some physicality to regain control of the situation and get back in front. But Luka's bigger and stronger, and so as a result, Luke is able to just power through anything that Jaden's doing, and then he methodically works into the lane. Gobert is screwed here no matter what, because if he steps up, Gafford's going to get a lob. He doesn't step up, and Luka gets a wide open layup. But once again, like that to me is one of those two plays, and we're going to get through some more in this run, but those two plays are just the microcosm of the entire series. Luka's comfortable against Jaden McDaniels and ISO, getting everywhere he wants. Luka's comfortable picking apart Minnesota's defense and pick and roll, regardless of what coverage they use. That really is the crux of the issue for Minnesota. Meanwhile, on the other end of the floor, Anthony Edwards looks flummoxed. This is an example of it actually hits a jumper here in this ball screen. I've got two thoughts on this one. You guys can see here a little brush screen from Conley first, forces a switch. Now Kyrie's on the ball. We're going to get a basic ball screen here. Kyrie's actually setting up to ice, so Gobert ends up reversing the screen angle. Gafford's up in this high drop. He starts to backpedal. Ant gets downhill a little bit, knocks down a pull-up 15-footer. Now, one of the things that I have been impressed by with Anthony Edwards is his pull-up jump shooting is down from where it was in the first two rounds, but he still has 16 points on 16 pull-up jumpers through two games, which is a point per shot, which is pretty good. It's below where he was in the last round, but it's pretty good. And so just one little side note, I've been really impressed by Anthony Edwards' pull-up shooting in general, and that's something that I think is going to serve him well over the course of the rest of his career. Now, one downside there is knocking down 1 point per pull-up jumper is not enough if you're not also getting into the lane, which is an issue with the rim protection that we talked about earlier. The second piece that I wanted to talk about, This dynamic right here is a fundamental difference between the Denver matchup and the Dallas matchup. As Ant comes around this screen, in the Denver series, this was Nikola Jokic. And Ant was able to like easily snake the pick and roll or maybe just get around him to his right-hand side. And he was beating this guy off the dribble. And in the last series, it was Jokic. And he was easily getting into the lane and he was finishing. Gafford and Lively have just been so much more capable of sliding step for step with Ant and forcing him to take these pull-up jumpers, which again, 1 point per shot is solid for a pull-up jumper. But in the lane, obviously you're hoping Ant's going to finish 65-ish% of those shots. That's 1.3 points per shot, right? So like, again, just fundamentally in terms of shot value, by closing off the lane and turning him into a pull-up shooter, you've mitigated some of the effects of their offense. Alrighty. This is Ant looking to attack Gafford on a switch. Couple of notes here. First, they switch to Luka. Then they another screen ends up with Gafford on the switch. Couple things here. I do like the idea. Now, this actually came out of two ball screens that turned into switches. But I do like the idea of Anthony Edwards just trying to attack off of the bounce. Just simply like screw a ball screen. I don't want a second defender in there at all. Let me just drive. But a couple of different things. First of all, this is a different level of athleticism waiting for Ant at the rim. Ant beats him off the dribble, but look at what he's dealing with here. He's got Derrick Jones Jr., who is a better vertical athlete than any perimeter player who plays for Dallas, and Daniel Gafford, who's a better vertical athlete than any player who plays for Dallas. Or excuse me, I said for Dallas, for Denver. Getting my teams confused. Too many teams that start with D. Derrick Jones Jr. is a more athletic perimeter player than any perimeter player that plays for Denver. And Daniel Gafford is a more athletic big man than any big man that plays for Denver. And so this is just more congestion, more length, more stuff around the rim to deal with for Anthony Edwards. Again, it's just an example of the difference in the matchup between those two teams. All righty, let's see here. Got another double drag here. And another Karl-Anthony Towns mistake on the back line. So we're going to have a very similar type of setup, right? Okay, here we are, double drag, right? Karl-Anthony Towns on PJ Washington in the left corner. He's the guy who's going to be the low man. Anthony Edwards on Kyrie Irving in the right corner. He's going to have to stay glued up, right? We have our double screen. We're going to get a hedge from Conley to try to kind of force. It's not much of a hedge, but he steps up a little bit. Once again, the roller gets behind. Jaden chases over the top instead of going underneath this time, but at least they get a little bit more pressure, just a tiny bit more pressure on Luka. But here's the problem. Karl-Anthony Towns just stepped in the lane. This is not a defensive 3 seconds. There's 13 on the shot clock here. Steps into the lane right there at 13, right? So Luka rises up. This is not a defensive 3 second situation. There's no reason for Karl-Anthony Towns to lunge back out of the lane to avoid a penalty, right? Derek Lively is behind the play. Luka throws a head fake, and this is some of the genius of Luka Doncic, right? He throws a head fake towards PJ Washington. But the point is Karl-Anthony Towns has to make a simple decision here. If I close out to PJ Washington and I leave Derek Lively for wide open underneath the basket, Luka's going to hit him, and it's going to be 2 points every single time. 2 points per possession. He's not missing a wide open dunk as a 7-foot athlete. But if he stays home on Lively, he'll force Luka to throw this skip pass. One, he might have a chance to close out. Two, even if PJ Washington hits this at 40%, that's 1.2 points per possession. So like literally a 40% reduction in shot quality if you just make the proper read here. But instead, he lunges back out to PJ Washington, bites on Luka's head fake, and now Derek Lively gets another uncontested dunk underneath the basket. So, like, this is Luka just toying with Karl-Anthony Towns in his inability to do his job here on the back line. There was a lot of conversation surrounding Rudy Gobert last night. We're going to talk about him a little bit more when we get to that final play. But, you know, for all the talk about the defense, and I have a pretty mild take with Rudy Gobert. We'll get into it in more detail, like I said, in a minute. But, like, Do I think he's overrated defensively? Yes. But do I think he's bad defensively? No. And it's gotten way too far off the rails where some people just act like he's a bum on that end of the floor. He's not. He's just not as good as the best guys, right? But he's still a very good defensive player. The biggest problem for Rudy Gobert is that he's a nearly useless offensive player. And this is one of the examples you'll see when you've got a rim protector involved in the action. Mike Conley's working downhill, but Gobert can't catch in here. He can't finish in here. He's just one of those players that's not that type of threat. Like, Lively's ignoring him and sitting underneath the basket, even if Karl-Anthony Towns wants to drive by PJ Washington. But every time you throw the ball to Gobert, he's going to do something like this. Like what is that? That ain't going to get the job done. Like I talked about a little bit last night, when you've got a guy like Anthony Edwards whose game is predicated on rim pressure, that's the one thing. Like, I love the fit of Rudy with perimeter defenders on the defensive end of the floor. I hate the fit on the offensive end of the floor when you're trying to slash. It's like the same reason why LeBron James has always wanted a shooting big. That's why Chris Bosh at center worked so well for them. That's why Kevin Love at center worked so well for them. That's how they won a championship in 2020 when Anthony Davis was hitting jump shots. When you've got a driving perimeter player and you got a big guy who can't shoot, it just causes a lot of problems for your offense. Here's a little guard screen for Luka, a little two-man game. As a result, Luka kind of gets Jaden on his hip. I'm going to back up a little bit because I want you guys to see this. Jaden's going to make a recovery step as he's chasing over the top. There's not any sort of hedge from Conley. As Jaden's making this recovery step, Luka uses that as an opportunity to use Jaden's momentum against him. So Jaden's working downhill. Look at him. He's going downhill. Now Luka's waiting for Jaden to make that massive recovery step to try to meet him back in here, and he goes to the step back dribble. That's how he gets that little bit of separation. Now, Jaden, because he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, still gets a really good contest, but that's Luka using simple leverage and understanding of the physics of defense and knowing that he's going to have to try to cut me off. I have an opportunity to go back here. Simple guard screen too to get him into trail position. This is another example of just some of the pick and roll coverage causing frustration for Anthony Edwards in ball screens. He just doesn't know what to do. Here comes another Jaden McDaniels screen with Luka, and he just jacks up a pull-up three with 11 on the shot clock that's heavily contested. He doesn't even have separation. Again, what makes Ant a hyper-efficient pull-up shooter, because he was much more efficient even than the 1 point per shot he was getting in this series in the first two rounds. But this guy needs to be on his heels. And the only way this guy's going to be on his heels is if the drive is a real threat, and it just hasn't been in this series. And misses the three. Gobert gets an offensive rebound, and then he throws this bullshit up. Look at this. Just his inability to do anything around the rim offensively is the major issue. That matters way more than anything that we talk about on the defensive end of the floor. Here's a straight ISO. Luka on Jaden McDaniels. Really, really nice example of ball handling here from Luka. I talk a lot about how I want younger players to kind of watch the way that Luka manipulates defenders with his ball handling. Here's a simple example of a counter move. Dribble, 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 dribble. He sees the simple footwork from Jaden where he's squared up too far to this side. Luka knows right here at this point in time. I'll back up just a tiny bit. Luka knows right now, as soon as Jaden's hips are picked up and facing towards the sideline, he knows now is the perfect time for him to cross over. It doesn't matter if Jaden's faster than him. It's a simple question of physics, like I talked about earlier. It's going to take an extra step for Jaden to change direction. So Luka then just crosses over, and then he sees this tiny bit of an angle. And again, Jaden's got his hand on him, and he's trying to hold him, but Luka's just bigger and stronger than him. And so there's just nothing he can do. He's got him trapped on his side now. Now he's just going to slowly put him in jail, and he's going to shoot this little popping floater in the lane. And that really is the biggest problem for Minnesota. Luka's got Jaden figured out. Ant doesn't have anybody figured out on the other end of the floor. I talked a little bit last night about Anthony Edwards needing to be more methodical in ball screens. I thought this was a good example of that. I want to play it in full speed first, and then we'll get into it in slow motion. So Josh Green's chasing downhill. There's a dig down from Jaden Hardy, and Ant throws this like kick out pass back to Jaden McDaniels. Jaden McDaniels actually drives and makes a short fadeaway here. But this is where I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the ways that Ant can look to attack more patiently. Let me figure out where we start here. Okay, here we are. So first of all, what does Luka usually do when something like this happens? As soon as Josh Green gets here, Luka usually will make another crossover back this way and have a rescreen from Gobert, and then he'll really get separation from Josh Green, okay? But even in that case, let's say that you do get Josh Green into a trail position like this. At this point, it would be beneficial, especially with all this traffic here in the lane, and you don't want to throw this kick out to McDaniels unless you absolutely have to, simply because McDaniels is a little bit inconsistent, right? Put him in jail. Slow down, bump Josh Green back, methodically work into the lane, like slowly dribble with Josh Green trapped on your backside. Let Gobert have time to roll, because if Gobert rolls, then Derek Lively will have to follow him. And if he doesn't follow him and they tag from one of these guys, then you make this kick out pass to the shooter. But instead with Ant, it's all one speed right now. It's just downhill, full speed. Oh shit, I'm in traffic. I got to do something. Now I'm going to throw this wild kick out pass to Jaden McDaniels. And so again, in the long run, that to me is the next step for Ant, is just becoming a little bit more methodical and playing at multiple speeds instead of just that downhill full speed. Excellent individual defense from PJ Washington on Karl-Anthony Towns here. There's a couple of clips of that. Just disrupting the base, forcing him into a tough over-the-top shot that he misses. More Luka Doncic just having no problem at all getting by Jaden McDaniels. Jaden disrupts his dribble a little bit here with some reaching. But every single time Jaden reaches, Luka just finds a way to stick his butt into his way to create that little bit of separation. It's like a little spin. See, it's like he knows he's going that way, right? So Luka's just going to turn and use his body to shield. Now he's got him trapped on his side again. Now he's going downhill again. Works into the lane, draws multiple defenders, patiently waits for Josh Green to break open here on the right wing, knocks down the three. He just has no problem getting to his spots against Jaden McDaniels. Here's another example of great individual defense from PJ Washington on Karl-Anthony Towns. Again, one of the things I talked about before we get into this, one of the things I talked about in the Denver series, if you guys remember correctly, with KCP and with Aaron Gordon, Cat usually will expose the ball. If you can absorb that initial bit of contact, Cat's really bad at protecting the basketball. And so Cat will expose the basketball here. And on the drive, as soon as he exposes it, that's when PJ Washington takes it away from him. Great defense from PJ Washington. Again, compare this. Compare Cat trying to go to work against PJ. Compare Anthony Edwards trying to go to work against Derrick Jones Jr. or Josh Green. Compare that with what what Luka's doing against Jaden McDaniels on the other end of the floor, or even Kyrie against Anthony Edwards. All right, what's our next clip here? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left. This was a solid driving kick from Anthony Edwards. Fast forward a little bit here. Save it. The problem is Nickeil Alexander-Walker's just really struggled to make shots. But this is another example, too, that I like of, like, don't call for a ball screen. Just beat your man off the dribble and make a kick-out pass. Gets into the lane. Nice little relocation. Just Nickeil Alexander-Walker's just been absolutely broke from the three-point line in this series. But again, that if you're Minnesota, if you're going to point to something like that, let's make sure that we also acknowledge that you're still shooting a hell of a lot better than Dallas is. This was a big driving kick from Kyrie Irving to Jaden Hardy on the left wing. Get some nail help from Kyle Anderson. Again, from here, little screen from Gafford. Gobert's too far back. Kyle Anderson. This is kind of bad help from Kyle Anderson too, because you got to know that Gobert's there and in position to handle this. Kyrie makes the right read. Jaden Hardy ends up knocking down the three. Now our run's over, right? So that everything that I just showed you was part of that 23-7 run. And the big thing that stands out, again, is on one end of the floor, it's Luka getting wherever he wants and consistently generating fantastic shots. On the other end of the floor, there's like Yeah, Ant has a nice driving kick to Jaden McDaniels on one of the plays, but other than that, it's a lot of just not knowing what they can do to generate a quality shot. Dallas just has them figured out on that side of the floor. All right, now we're going to look at the final 3 possessions that I want to hit here. 4 possessions, actually. All right, so it's 108-103 with a minute and a half left. Dallas has the ball. Out of this kind of sequence, there's a little bit of a broken play, and there ends up being a late double team on Luka. So right here, there's the kick. Kyrie kicks back. Now there's 5 seconds on the shot clock. Kyle Anderson and Anthony Edwards double team Luka, and Mike Conley makes a bad read. You have Derrick Jones Jr. with an above the break 3, or you have Kyrie Irving in the corner. And instead, Conley ends up closing out his first step towards Derrick Jones Jr. and leaves Kyrie open. Huge shot from Kyrie after he missed those 2 free throws. Also a great find from Luka. On the other end of the floor, this was the play where Anthony Edwards looked to attack Derek Lively on a switch. But the problem is, when we get the switch here, Lively's now on Gobert, Derrick Jones Jr. Lively's now on Ant, Derrick Jones Jr. is now on Gobert. But as soon as Ant looks to go to work, watch Derrick Jones Jr. He goes, oh wait, that's Rudy Gobert. I'm not worried about him. Let's throw a late double. That stops the drive. If that late double is not there, Ant actually has the angle on Derek Lively, and he's going down into the lane. But because Gobert is just a non-threat down here, Derrick Jones Jr. is able to step up, and as a result, Derek Lively is able to recover, and now Anthony Edwards is stuck without his dribble in the middle of the floor, and there's a random late Kyle Anderson's telling him to pass to the corner, but Naz Reid randomly relocates and ends up throwing it in the gap between where they were. So like bad decision from Ant, but also the reality of the Gobert problem. Luka's game winner. We get a switch. Now let's take a quick survey of the floor. Kyrie Irving's in the corner. You're staying home, right? Derrick Jones Jr. is in this corner. You're staying home. PJ Washington's kind of lingering around the dunker spot, right? They're going to slide up, and PJ Washington's going to go back out to this corner. But all Gobert has to do here, he has one job. Look at the scoreboard. It's 108-106. A 3 kills you. A 2, you get to go on the other end and potentially take the lead or go to overtime. It's the worst thing that can happen to you is overtime, right? Gobert has one job, to chase him off the three-point line, and he makes a critical mistake here. The mistake is right here. Luka fakes a drive. Right there, see? Crosses over, he fakes a drive. Everybody in the world, everybody in this arena, everybody watching on their TVs, everybody who's watching the game in any way, shape, or form knows Luka's chasing a 3 here. That's what you do on the road in the playoffs down to in general. Also, Luka just has a tendency to do this kind of thing because he's a psychopath competitor, and he's done it before. He did it to the Clippers in the bubble, if you guys remember. As he makes this move, what I want you guys to watch Gobert's footwork. As Gobert turns, right here, Luka's faking a drive, and the drive does not hurt you. If Luka finishes this drive, the only thing that could happen, Jaden McDaniels stays glued home. Naz Reid is in a one-on-one with Derek Lively. Maybe Naz Reid steps up and has to help on Luka, and then you get a lob dunk to Derek Lively, but then you got a chance to go down to the other end of the floor and win the game. Or worst case scenario, you go to overtime. That does not hurt you. Watch this step Gobert takes right here. This is where he's done. Boom, right foot. 17 feet from the basket to cut off a drive that could not hurt could not hurt Minnesota. As a result, Luka's able to easily step back to his right and get plenty of separation for a great look from 3. That is just either a complete lack of understanding of time and score or just a lack of understanding of what the game plan was. Chris Finch said after the game plan was to switch and to crowd him off the three-point line. So Gobert just didn't do his job. That was an error in execution there from Rudy Gobert. And again, one last note on the Gobert piece. Again, like this is what I feel about Rudy Gobert. Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis, I should say, excuse me. Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, Victor Wembanyama, Draymond Green, those guys to me have a better ability to defend perimeter players in space while also offering rim protection than Rudy Gobert. To me, Rudy Gobert is in that 5th to 7th best defensive player in the world type of area in the league. That said, he has very little in the way of offensive responsibility, so he gets to pour every bit of his energy and effort and focus into the defensive end of the floor. And so that allows him to perform better over the course of the 82-game season. In addition to that, he's got this deeply entrenched support in the niche basketball media, especially the niche basketball media who's hyper-focused on catch-all metrics and different ways to try to measure defense through numbers instead of what we see on film. And so as a result of that, I do think Rudy Gobert is a little overrated defensively. I do not think that he's the best defensive player in the world. I do not think he deserves 4 defensive player of the year trophies. I think he's somewhere around the 5th to 7th best defensive player in the league. That said, all of that pales in comparison to the issues that he brings on the offensive end of the floor. His inability to catch and finish anything around the rim except for a wide open, uncontested dunk causes major issues for an offense in Minnesota that desperately needs driving space for their stars. Karl-Anthony Towns is a guy who likes to slash to the basket, quick spin moves off the catch, rip through moves to the right. Anthony Edwards is a downhill threat, right? That's what he does. And so again, we can talk about the defensive end of the floor, and yeah, I do think he's a little overrated, but it's mainly that defensive end or the offensive end of the floor that is an issue. All right, last play. Really, really nice dig down and contest from Derrick Jones Jr. here. So we're going to get a basic kind of drive from Ant catches and rips. Watch Derrick Jones dig down, making for an easy read to Nas. Look at this contest. Unbelievable job from Derrick Jones Jr. And Nas still almost makes it because he was red hot all night, but I thought that was about as good as you can do defending that. If you don't dig down there, Ant's going to turn the corner and get into the lane and probably get something significantly closer to the rim, which can beat you there. One last note before we get out of here. I saw a lot of people saying what about when Jamal Murray barbecued Anthony Davis to win game 2 of the Western Conference first round series with the Lakers. And there was that possession was so different than the possession that Rudy Gobert just had. In the Laker game, it was tied. So when Jamal Murray, and we did a whole film session on that, when Jamal Murray made that aggressive dribble drive fake, Anthony Davis had to react to it. Because if Jamal turns the corner on him and gets into the lane, that layup is a super high percentage shot that beats you, right? So his job is fundamentally different. If you're asking Anthony Davis, hey, you're on an ISO with Jamal Murray, tie game on the line. What is your job? His job is to make Jamal Murray take a tough, contested, fadeaway jump shot instead of giving him anything easy going towards the rim. Anthony Davis did his job. Jamal Murray took a tough fadeaway towards his right where he literally fell down onto the ground and he made the shot. That is very different than a possession where your team is down by 2 or up by 2, and your only job is to chase him off the three-point line and make sure they cannot win the game there. That is your only job. If he toasts you off the dribble, it does not cost you the game. You live to fight again on the following possession or in overtime. It is not the same to me. And so comparing those two is silly. And this is really the crux of what makes Rudy Gobert not the same level of defender, in my opinion, as Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, Draymond Green, Victor Wembanyama. It's about instincts. Rudy Gobert has such a mechanical approach to defense that when Luka hits a fake dribble move on him, he bites on it, even though the game plan specifically calls for him to allow that. Whereas there is a level of defensive instinct that Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo and Draymond Green and Victor Wembanyama have that does not allow them to succumb to that type of failed execution. And that, to me, is the difference between him and the defenders at the top of the league. Rudy Gobert is a very good defensive player, but I'm just sick and tired of everyone talking about how he's like the best defensive player in the league. Here's all these impact metrics. He is the very best at, leading to lower than average percentages on finishes around the rim over the course of an 82-game season. None of that matters because repeatedly when you get into late game situations, guys target him. Guys want to go after him because they know that he's uncoordinated and a little bit awkward and a little bit susceptible to some of these basic dribble drive fakes. Anthony Davis, for all you want to say about that Jamal Murray shot, let's not forget game 4 of the Western Conference second round last year, where literally he peeled off onto a switch on Steph Curry and got stops on him twice. Stopped him twice on an island in ISO. And that was he did his job. He forced him into tough step back jumpers and he just happened to miss them. And so again, I think the focus is too much on Rudy Gobert on the defensive end, and a lot of the takes I see are outrageous. Like, a lot of people act like he's a bum or he can't do it. That's not true. He's a very good defensive player. He's just not as good as the players at the top of the league. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. I think that film session gives you guys a little bit of a breakdown in the difference in the half-court shot quality and execution between the two teams, and a good example of why I'm so confident in Dallas closing this series out, regardless of what may or may not have happened last night. We will be going with Colin Cowherd tomorrow night after the final buzzer of Game 3. I will see you guys then.